You didn't notice me when you locked yourself in behind those emotional walls, when you numbed yourself to the sound of my presence. Yet I never left. I stood right there, in the thick of the silence, not demanding, not forcing, but waiting with a love too deep to measure and a patience too fierce to be broken by your rejection. Every slammed door echoed through eternity, but I stayed still, like a shepherd refusing to abandon a lost lamb too wounded to cry out, because you didn't need noise. You needed to know I'd stay even when you had nothing left to say. While you chased voices that promised relief and opened gates that led to sorrow, I remained unmoved at your last closed door, gently knocking, not pounding, because true love doesn't destroy your space to rescue you. It respects your freedom while longing for your return. I knew you weren't ignoring me out of hatred, but out of hurt so heavy you feared even my light would expose the parts of you you tried to bury. But I didn't come to expose you, I came to heal you. And I wasn't afraid of the mess you thought would repel me, nor the silence that made others walk away from you. I waited, not because I was weak, but because I wanted you to see the difference between the ones who demand your best and the one who stays when you're at your worst. I stayed when your hope died, when your prayers dried up, when your smile turned into silence, because my heart beats in rhythm with your pain, and I don't give up just because you gave in. While the world passed you by, labeling you broken, I waited to show you that your worth never changed in my eyes, and I will keep waiting, through every moment you feel unworthy, until the day your heart finally turns, not out of fear, but because it remembers who stood in the silence and never left. You tried to shut me out with your doubts, with your business, with your secret fears dressed up as strength, but you didn't realize you could never outrun a love that fills everything, every void, every shadow, every inch of space you thought was too ruined for me to reach. You didn't hear my footsteps, but I was already in the places you told me not to enter. I didn't wait for an invitation, because love like mine doesn't ask for comfort, it moves into the discomfort, into the places you hide when no one else understands. You buried your soul in distractions, in temporary escapes, in masks so thick not even your own reflection could recognize you. But my love never stopped tracing every outline of your being, clinging to the essence of you that even you gave up on. You blocked the calls, ignored the signs, silenced every whisper that hinted I still cared, and yet you found yourself strangely comforted in the loneliest of nights, not realizing it was still me hovering near, not in anger, not in accusation, but in an embrace that held you without words. You shut the curtains, but the warmth still found your skin. That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't luck. That was me wrapping you, surrounding you, not demanding your attention but refusing to remove my love. You distanced yourself thinking I'd walk away too, like others did. But what you didn't see is that I come closer when others step back. I pursue when you're paralyzed. I cover when you crumble. Even when your thoughts cursed me, even when your hands built barriers, I continued to move quietly, steadily, like the evening sky swallowing the day, like a blanket tucking in a child too tired to believe they are loved. You couldn't stop me with your silence, couldn't push me back with your rebellion, couldn't erase me with your denial, because my love isn't fragile, it's relentless. And even now, while you wrestle with the idea that maybe you're too far gone, I'm still here, not just nearby but encompassing every broken rhythm of your heartbeat. The same way the stars light up the darkest skies without asking for attention, my presence surrounds you without demanding applause. I'm not asking for a performance. I'm not measuring your worth by how loud your praise is. I'm simply waiting, covering, loving you through the chaos you think you have to manage on your own. And though you tried to close the door again, I didn't just stand outside, I stayed with you, unseen but not absent, unheard but not gone. Because the kind of love I carry doesn't fade when ignored. It doesn't retreat when resisted. It moves like the night, unshakable, steady, patient until it swallows every lie that said you were abandoned. I never left. I never stop. I never will. You were never too heavy for me. Your collapse didn't scare me. It was your disbelief in my hands that broke my heart. I didn't flinch when you fell, I prepared to catch you, but you turned away before I could. You thought I would recoil at your weakness, but I was reaching out to prove that my strength was made for moments just like that. You carried shame as if it was a crown, and you buried your head when you could have leaned it on my shoulder. The weight wasn't what cried you, it was thinking you had to bear it alone. You called yourself a disappointment, but I never saw you as one. I didn't weep because you got it wrong. I wept because you didn't think I'd love you through it. Every time you stumbled and braced yourself for abandonment, you rehearsed pain I never planned to give you. I wasn't watching to see if you were strong enough, I was watching to show you that I'm strong enough for the both of us. When you failed, you believed the worst about me. You thought I'd become cold, distant, fed up with the process of picking you back up again. But that's where the ache came from, not your fall, but your inability to believe that I was still for you, still with you, still choosing you even after the pieces hit the ground. I never once kept a record of how many times you didn't get it right. I wasn't counting failures. I was counting the moments I could rush in and hold you tighter. You expected punishment, but I only carried mercy. You waited for the anger, but I brought gentleness. You hardened your heart thinking I was preparing a lecture, but I was preparing a robe, a ring, and a table. You don't understand what you mean to me. You think I'm only proud when you're standing tall, but I was proud when you were on the floor, still breathing, still fighting, still mine. The pain of your fall wasn't as deep as the pain of watching you believe you had to hide from me because of it. I longed for you to see me as your rescuer, not your referee. I longed for you to run toward me, not from me. I didn't need you to explain your fall, I already knew. I just needed you to look up and see that my arms weren't folded, they were wide open. You imagined a disappointed king, but I came as a compassionate savior. You were bracing for consequences, but I was preparing comfort. Not once did I hesitate. Not once did I second-guess my decision to love you. If only you could have seen the way heaven stilled when you wept. If only you could have seen how I leaned you in, hoping you'd let me be your healer, not your judge. My tears were full of longing, not sorrow for your mistake, but a deep cry for you to remember who I am. I was never afraid of your humanity. I embraced it, entered it, wore it, blend through it just so I could show you that I understand. And now, even here, even after all of it, I'm still ready to lift you not just from the ground, but from the mindset that told you I only love you when you're winning. No, child. I love you when you're bleeding, when you're doubting, when you're breaking. I love you when you don't see any reason to be loved. And I will keep loving you, even in the places you've locked me out of. Because my love is not a response to your success, it's the foundation for your restoration. I didn't weep because you fell. I wept because you thought I'd leave you there. You held on so tightly to what was crushing you, believing it was yours to fix, yours to carry, yours to prove, but all the while, I stood nearby, watching the weight bend your back and shatter your peace, not because I enjoyed your pain, but because I had better in my hands, waiting for your release. I never handed you those chains, but you held them as if they were gifts, as if suffering under their pressure was your only purpose. You cried out wondering why you were exhausted, why joy seemed so far away, why every step felt like dragging bricks through your soul, but those things weren't sent by me. They were expectations placed on you by others who never saw the fragile beauty I designed you with. They were identities you picked up in desperation when the world told you who to be to survive. But child, I never asked you to survive, I called you to live. And yet, I watched with a breaking heart as you wrapped your arms around lies, toxic patterns, old memories dressed as comfort, familiar wounds you kept pressing because they were all you knew. I whispered, let it go. I whispered, that's not from me. But you couldn't hear me over the noise of your self-condemnation. You thought if you could just hold it together a little longer, you'd earn something. You thought if you didn't let go, at least you'd have control. But you lost more than you gained clinging to fragments I never authored. And the longer you gripped those things, the more your strength drained, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, until you couldn't even remember what peace felt like. You were walking through life half alive, fighting for things that were never part of my blueprint for you. I didn't come to condemn you for it, I came to invite you into freedom. I didn't look at you with disappointment. I looked at you with yearning, longing to show you the difference between what you picked up in panic and what I've prepared in promise. If only you had known how ready I was to exchange your burden for my rest, your striving for my presence, your chaos for my calm. But I didn't force your hand open. I watched and waited, not because I was indifferent, but because I honor your will even when it chooses pain. Still, I hovered close. Still, I spoke in your silence. Still, I ached with every tear you shed over things that were never meant to define you. I saw the heartbreak when what you held began to fall apart, and instead of standing back, I moved closer, ready to catch what remained, to rebuild from the ashes, to show you that even though your strength faded, my love never will. You're not weak because you're tired. You're tired because you've carried things without me. And now, I'm still offering you what I always have: peace that doesn't require performance, identity that's not tied to outcomes, and a love that's not based on whether you get it right. Will you unclench your fists? Will you trust me to hold what's too heavy for you? You weren't made to hold everything, you were made to be held by me. You didn't realize how many times I tried to reach you, not through thunder or fire, but through the subtle stillness you kept overlooking. While the world shouted its demands, flooded your mind with noise, and dressed its chaos in urgency, I kept speaking in the quiet places, not because I lacked power, but because I wanted you to lean in close. I watched you chase clarity in a storm of confusion, thinking answers had to be loud to be true. But I've always spoken differently. I don't compete with chaos. I wait for your spirit to notice me in the spaces in between. And even when you couldn't slow down, when you were running from one thing to the next, bearing your heart under deadlines, distractions, and the expectations of others, I remained near, whispering identity when the world tried to rename you. I whispered healing while your wounds screamed. I whispered purpose while fear tried to convince you there was none. I never stopped. Not when you were too busy. Not when you were numb. Not even when you believed you were unworthy of my voice. I kept coming, like the morning light, like breath in your lungs, like peace that has no explanation. But the world told you I was distant, that if I were real I'd speak in ways impossible to ignore. What they didn't tell you is that I often come in the form of peace in the middle of your unrest, the gentle nudge that something holy is near even when everything else is falling apart. You thought the absence of thunder meant the absence of me, but I've always worked through quiet persistence, not explosive displays. I whispered when you cried yourself to sleep, when no one checked on you, when the smile you wore cracked beneath pressure. I whispered truth when lies clawed at your mind. And though you tried to drown me out, I never left the room. I didn't shout because I wasn't angry. I didn't rage because I wasn't disappointed. I whispered because I am close, and I wanted you to choose to hear me, not because I demanded it, but because you desired it. The intimacy I offer can't be found in noise. It lives in the sacred hush, the kind that surrounds you when you finally stop pretending to be strong. I whispered in the middle of your anxiety, hoping you'd feel the difference between fear's chaos and my calm. I whispered when you were about to quit, not to push you harder, but to remind you I'm still here. You've asked where I was when it got too much, beloved. I was in the pause between your thoughts, in the breath you took right before giving up, in the silence that wasn't empty, but waiting for you to tune your spirit to a higher frequency. The enemy made noise his weapon. I made stillness my sanctuary. And even now, when your head is full and your soul is restless, my whisper is still reaching for you. I haven't stopped calling. I haven't changed my tone. I'm still that voice that doesn't condemn, still that presence that doesn't rush. I'm here, and I'm speaking not in the way the world trains you to hear, but in the language of love that doesn't force itself to be heard, because it already knows it belongs in your heart. Let the world scream, but come sit with me in the quiet. That's where I'll always meet you. You think the crucifixion was the peak of my suffering, but it was only the beginning of what love would choose to endure for you. The nails tore through flesh, But your silence cut through the deepest chambers of my heart, not because you were wicked, but because I knew what I carried for you, and still, you questioned if you were ever worth noticing. It wasn't your flaws that wounded me, it was your belief that I could ever forget you. I endured the cross with full knowledge of every moment you would look the other way, not out of rebellion, but out of woundedness you thought disqualified you from being seen. But the ache intensified not from your rejection, but from your assumption that my love had limits, that somehow your distance could push me back further than the arms I stretched on that wooden beam. I bore your sin, yes, but I also bore the ache of waiting for you to see yourself the way I always have, chosen, cherished, irreplaceable. The world made you feel invisible, and over time, you believed that even I must have looked away too. But I never blinked. I watched when you stopped believing you mattered. I felt the shift when you pulled your heart away, thinking I was too holy to want anything to do with your mess. Yet what stung wasn't your mess, it was your belief that my blood wasn't enough to cover it. I watched you walk past every moment I designed to draw you near, convinced that surely I'd moved on. But I never did. I never will. The pain of being pushed aside by the very one I bled for is not the kind of pain that ends, it deepens. Not because I'm bitter, but because I love you far more than you can ever measure in human terms. I wept not just for your mistakes, but for the weight you carried thinking you had to fix yourself before you could face me. You avoided my presence like it was a courtroom, when all I ever wanted was a reunion. Every time you turned your face away, I remembered the moment I turned mine to the sky in agony, not to curse your name, but to finish the work that would make your return possible. I never once saw you as a burden. Even in your coldest seasons, I kept burning with affection for you. I was present when you forgot me. I stayed loyal when your trust wavered. I kept pursuing even when your walls got higher and your prayers got quieter. The worst part was not your absence, it was knowing how deeply you needed me and still believing I wouldn't come close. But I did. I do. I always will. My love isn't dependent on your ability to feel it. It doesn't retract when ignored. It doesn't dissolve under disappointment. It stays. It waits. It aches. And it reaches even through the silence, even through the numbness, even through the nights when you cry without understanding why. You were never abandoned. You were never overlooked. And even now, I stand here not angry, not resentful, but aching with hope that maybe this time, you'll hear me not with your ears but with your spirit. Because the cross was never meant to be your guilt trip. It was meant to be your doorway back home. And even if the world continues to pass you by, know this: I never stopped watching. I never stopped loving. And no pain, not even the ones I bore on Calvary, will ever stop me from loving you again and again and again. You kept calling for deliverance while sprinting in the opposite direction of the one who could truly set you free. I saw your desperation, heard the tremble in your voice when you whispered for help through clenched teeth, drowning in the very waters you thought you could walk through alone. And still, my hand remained steady, extended, unwavering, patient, hovering just inches from your grasp, not withdrawn in judgment but reaching in hope. You were so focused on finding an exit your own way that you didn't see the rescue standing still in front of you. You didn't realize you were fighting the very arms that had come to lift you. Each time you collapsed beneath the weight, you asked where I was, not knowing I was the one keeping the weight from crushing you completely. I was the strength beneath your weariness, the stability beneath your chaos. But you wanted it your way. You wanted freedom without surrender, peace without trust, miracles without dependence. And even though you stumbled while resisting me, I still followed, not in anger, but in a broken-hearted pursuit that refused to abandon you. You feared that my help came with strings. You feared that if you reached out, you'd be met with a lecture, with conditions, with a list of requirements to earn your place again. But that's not who I am. My hand doesn't demand perfection, it just desires your honesty. And every time you turned away, convinced I must have grown tired of reaching, I kept extending my help, not once retracting it, not once growing weary of you. The struggle you endured wasn't punishment. It was a consequence of running from the very presence created to carry you. You prayed for peace, but ran toward chaos. You asked for answers, but clung to voices that only multiplied your confusion. And still, I remained, whispering in the background, holding the lifeline you thought was no longer yours. I knew you'd break eventually. I knew your strength would run out. And I wasn't hoping for your failure, I was preparing for your return. Because I never needed you to impress me with your survival skills. I was waiting for the moment you'd finally stop running and fall into the arms that never stopped chasing you. I was never trying to teach you a lesson through your collapse, I was showing you that I am the only one who never lets go. You feared surrender would make you weak, but surrender is what sets you free. You feared trust would make you vulnerable, but trust is what restores you. I never asked you to earn my help, I only asked you to accept it. And now, even with all the distance, with all the backtracking and walls you've built, my hand is still right here. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to explain anything. You just have to stop running. You just have to turn around. Because I'm not behind you to remind you of what you did wrong, I'm beside you, reminding you of who you still were. Mine. This isn't the end. This isn't where your story stopped. This is the moment your running turns into returning, and my hand that waited every day for your surrender is the same hand that will lift you now without shame, without delay, without holding anything against you. Every time your knees gave way under pressure, every time your lungs tightened from fear and your body trembled from exhaustion, I was there not as some distant figure watching from above, but as the very life force holding your existence together when everything else was falling apart. You couldn't feel me because you were measuring my presence by emotions, by sensations, by circumstances, but I was never hiding. I wasn't absent when the room went dark. I wasn't gone when your heart cracked under the weight of betrayal or failure. I was within every breath you managed to take when you thought you had no strength left to continue. You assumed I had turned away, that I had lost interest, that I had walked away like others did when your pain became inconvenient, but I never moved. I became the quiet stillness in your panic, the invisible strength in your trembling, the warmth that steadied you even when you couldn't understand where it was coming from. You thought you were surviving on your own, but it was my spirit sustaining you when you thought you'd already lost everything. In moments when you whispered, "I can't do this anymore," I answered without sound, filling your chest with another breath, giving you one more second, one more heartbeat, one more chance to feel how close I truly was. You looked for signs and missed the miracle of your own survival. You searched the sky for my voice, not realizing it was echoing through your ribs through the very breath you didn't think you deserved anymore. You wanted to see me part the seas, but I was carrying you across the waves. You wanted me to break through the clouds, but I was closer than the skin on your bones. I never left you to fend for yourself in the wilderness. I became your compass, even when you didn't know you were being guided. Your collapse didn't scare me. It brought me closer. I wasn't waiting for you to rise again to prove your worth. I came to be the one who holds you when you can't get up at all. I didn't need you to fight your way back to me. I came to sit beside you in your silence, to breathe with you through the numbness, to be near when you couldn't articulate what was hurting. I saw how you doubted me, how you thought I had other priorities, how you convinced yourself your prayers were ignored, but what you didn't realize is that while you were losing faith in me, I was guarding what little strength you had left. I knew the words you couldn't form. I knew the ache you didn't have the vocabulary to describe. And I stayed not because you were strong, but because my love doesn't depend on your strength. I don't measure your worth by how well you hold it together. I don't pull away when you fall apart. I was the presence you didn't know was holding your world up when everything else was crumbling. And even now, if you really pause, you'll feel it. That steady rhythm, that unexplainable endurance. That's me. I am not far. I never was. I am in the rise and fall of your chest. I am the calm in your trembling. I am the steady in your chaos. And I will stay through every collapse, every doubt, every dark moment, because I did not choose you for your strength. I chose you because I love you. and love never leaves. You questioned me when the winds howled and everything around you broke. You stared at the damage and assumed I must have authored it, that maybe I was teaching you a lesson through pain, that somehow you deserved the ruin you were standing in. But I wasn't the one who tore the roof off your peace. I was the shelter you didn't realize was holding. While the waves crashed over your dreams and lightning exposed the things you thought were hidden, I wasn't on the other side watching with folded arms. I was right there, shoulder to shoulder with your shivering soul, anchoring you quietly so you wouldn't be swallowed. You cried out, "Why are you doing this to me?" Not knowing that I was whispering, "I'm the one holding you together." A storm didn't come from me, but I refused to let it take you from me. I didn't bring the chaos, but I brought the calm. And even when you were convinced that I must have walked away, I was closer than your breath, defending you in ways you didn't see, blocking what could have broken you completely. You only noticed the winds that howled, but not the fire I extinguished before it touched you. You saw what was taken, but not what I preserved. You felt the tremors, but didn't feel the arms wrapped around you in the unseen realm, shielding your spirit when your body collapsed. The battle wasn't to punish you, it was revealing who I am in ways comfort never could. When everything familiar was stripped away, you began to see what remained, and what remained was me, faithful, unshaken, undefeated. You thought I abandoned you, but I was standing in the middle of your storm, breaking wave after wave just to keep your hope alive. You were angry, and I understood. You were afraid, and I didn't fault you. You wrestled with trust, and I didn't withdraw. I took it all, stood firm, and kept showing up, not because you always believed, but because I never stopped loving. The storm never had authority over your destiny. It was loud, yes. It was violent, yes. But it didn't carry the final word. I did. And my word was that you would live, even when everything screamed that you wouldn't make it. You measured my love by what stayed. But I want you to look again and see my love by what left, because some things I allowed to fall apart were the very things that were keeping you from truly breathing. You didn't understand why I didn't stop the chaos. But you will understand why I let it run its course, because when it's over, and the dust settles, you'll realize you were never standing alone in it. You'll look back and know that it didn't crush you because I stood in front of you. You'll see that you weren't as fragile as you feared, because you were being carried the entire time. And now, even if the clouds still linger, even if the wind hasn't fully calmed, I'm still here. Not walking away, not growing tired, not waiting for you to thank me, but just hoping you'll finally see that I never sent the storm, I silenced it. You only saw the ashes, the ruin, the smoke that filled your days with confusion and your nights with sorrow. And in your pain, you pointed toward me, wondering why I didn't stop it, why I let the fire touch what mattered most to you. But what you never saw, what no one sees with natural eyes, were the infernos that raged all around you, fires that sought to consume not just what you built, but who you are. And I stood between them and your soul without ever asking for recognition. You measured my love by what burned, but my protection was in what never reached you. I stepped into battles you didn't know were being fought on your behalf. I intercepted destruction that was aimed at your identity, your sanity, your very life, and not once did I retreat. The blaze you witnessed was real, but it wasn't the full picture. What you mourned was only part of the story, a piece of something far greater that I was preserving. I let certain things fall, not to harm you, but to keep you from clinging to what was slowly undoing you. You cried as doors closed and relationships vanished, not realizing they were carrying smoke that would have suffocated your purpose if left untouched. You were upset with me, and I understood. You felt betrayed, and I stayed anyway, because your safety matters more to me than your temporary comfort. And sometimes love means stepping in front of what you think you want to protect you from what you don't yet understand. I didn't answer with explanations, I answered with covering. While you were lamenting what you lost, I was holding back what you were never meant to carry. You didn't see the demonic schemes I dismantled in silence. You didn't feel the weight of the chains I broke before they ever reached your ankles. You didn't hear the accusations I silenced in the courts of heaven on your behalf. And I didn't do it for gratitude, I did it because I love you with a love that fights without needing applause. You blamed me because the fire hurt, but I allowed the refining, not the ruining. I permitted what would purify, but I blocked what would paralyze. I stood between you and destruction, not to boast, but to preserve the story still unfolding in you. I didn't burn your dreams to ashes. I removed the ones that would have burned you. I wasn't trying to punish you, I was trying to reposition you. Because what's ahead cannot be built on foundations that crack under pressure. And though the fire took some things from your hands, it could never touch the promise I planted in your spirit. That part of you, the eternal part, remained untouched. I kept it sealed, hidden in me, waiting for the day you would see that my protection has always looked different than what you imagine. And now, I'm still doing it. Even now, there are sparks around you I'm extinguishing before they ever ignite. There are traps I've routed you from without you even knowing. There are wounds you could have carried that would have marked you forever, wounds I intercepted without needing you to see how. That's how deep my love runs. I don't just walk with you through the fire. I walk ahead of it. I go before you in ways you'll only understand later. And even if you never see the full extent of what I stopped for your sake, let this truth settle in your heart. I've always been for you. Even when the flames rose. Even when you didn't understand. Even when you thought I lit the match. I was the shield, always the shield between you and what was sent to destroy you. I didn't flinch when your voice rose in frustration, when your questions came sharp like daggers, or when your silence screamed louder than any words could. You mistook my stillness for abandonment, but I was simply remaining, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew your pain needed presence more than answers. You turned your back, threw words into the air that you thought would push me away, questioned everything we once shared, and even dared me to leave, and yet I stayed. I waited through the rage you didn't understand, through the accusations born from disappointment, through the glare in your eyes that said, if you really cared, you wouldn't have let this happen. You see, child, I wasn't threatened by your rebellion. I wasn't intimidated by your resistance. I knew the layers behind your defiance, the grief behind your silence, the deep ache that made you slam the door, not because you didn't love me, but because you didn't know how to face what you felt. I heard every word, every tear, every breathless moment where you clenched your jaw and refused to break, but I saw through all of it. I saw the little one in you still longing to be held. I didn't walk away, even when you tried to erase me from your world. I didn't shrink back, even when your heart was too bruised to receive comfort. Because real love doesn't leave when it's no longer convenient. It doesn't withdraw when misunderstood. It doesn't choose self-protection over sacrifice. I waited, not impatiently, not with a clock in my hand or conditions in my mind, but with arms wide open and a heart that never stopped hoping. Every moment you turned away, I moved closer. Not to force you back, but to be near enough when you were ready. I didn't count how long it had been. I didn't keep a record of how far you ran. I simply remained. You mistook your anger as something that disqualified you from intimacy with me, but I saw it as the proof that your heart still felt, still searched, still cried out for something deeper. And while others grew tired of your walls and your distance, I stood still, an unmoving lighthouse in the storm, unwavering in affection. I wasn't waiting for you to get over it. I was waiting with you in it. I never needed your mood to change for my commitment to remain. I never measured our connection by how soft your voice was or how clean your prayers sounded. You were always loved, even in your most resistant hour. When you stopped talking, I listened harder. When you shut me out, I came nearer, not to invade, but to remind you that love remains. When you lashed out, I held firm, not because I wanted to win the argument, but because I refused to lose you. And now, even now, as you read these words and remember the weight of those seasons, I want you to know that not a single second of your rebellion made me love you less. Not one breath of your anger changed my mind about you. I didn't come for the obedient version of you, I came for all of you. The raw, real, complicated, wounded version that most people never saw, but I always did. I waited not because I had to, but because my love could never walk away from the one I chose, the one I died for, the one I'm still calling home. You questioned my justice because your pain felt louder than my promises. You saw others rise while you stood still, and it made you wonder if I had favorites, if perhaps you had fallen out of favor without realizing it. You called me silent, accused me of withholding, told yourself that maybe I only bless certain kinds of people, the ones who have their lives together, the ones who don't wrestle the way you do. You thought you had every reason to walk away. Every unanswered prayer felt like evidence, every closed door a signpost that I had changed toward you. You were raw with disappointment, and I never dismissed your ache. I took every accusation, not with distance but with closeness. I didn't defend myself because love doesn't compete with wounds, it listens. I didn't withdraw my presence when you hurled your frustration into the sky. I leaned in. I heard the tremor in your voice that exposed more grief than rebellion. You didn't curse me because you hated me. You cried out because you couldn't understand why things still felt broken. And still, through every word uttered in the heat of disillusionment, I whispered, "You're still mine." Not because of how well you believe, not because of how perfectly you behave, but because I chose you long before your confusion ever formed. You see your doubts as disqualifying, but I see them as evidence that your heart still longs for something real. You wouldn't have wrestled with me if you didn't believe deep down I was there to hear it. And I did. I was there through every tear you shed on the nights you thought no one noticed. I was near when you sat in rooms full of people feeling invisible, wondering if even I saw you anymore. I watched you try to be grateful while feeling empty, watched you force smiles to mask a growing heaviness, and even when you blamed me for your pain I stayed. Because my love isn't insecure. My commitment to you doesn't fluctuate with your perception. You believed I was unfair, but I was weaving protection where you only saw delay. You assumed I was punishing you by holding things back, but I was preparing something beyond what you asked for. And while you accused me of forgetting you, I was carefully placing answers in places you hadn't yet arrived. You cried, "Why them and not me?" And I didn't answer with comparison, I answered with promise, that I would give you something so tailored, so precise, so complete, that you would one day thank me for every door I didn't open. I wasn't dismissing you when I said, "Wait." I was dignifying you with something worth the waiting. But I never demanded that you understand it to still call you mine. I never waited for you to change your tone before drawing close again. Even when your questions felt like walls, I passed through them not to argue, but to embrace. I never stopped calling you my child. Not when your words trembled with doubt. Not when you sat in bitterness wondering if I saw you at all. Not when your faith wore thin and you wanted to stop hoping altogether. I held on to you when you weren't sure you wanted to hold on to me. I whispered identity over you when you were ready to walk away. And even now I want you to know that nothing you've said, nothing you've thought, nothing you've questioned has pushed me away. You are still mine. Not because you always believe the right things, but because I always love the same way. Constant. Present. Ajagan. And I will keep calling you mine until you finally realize that I never stop. You measured my love through the ticking of clocks, through dates circled in hope and crossed out in sorrow, convinced that if I truly cared, I would have moved faster, opened the door sooner, made the pain shorter. But what you didn't see, what I never stopped seeing, was what waited behind the timelines you begged me to accelerate. You thought I was being distant when really, I was being deliberate. You wanted what was next, but I saw what you weren't ready for. Not because you were lacking, not because you failed me, but because I was shielding you from receiving something beautiful too early, too raw, too heavy for hands still healing. What you called denial was actually preservation. What you saw as me holding back was me holding you steady. You were asking for a gift while I was fortifying your heart so it wouldn't destroy you when it arrived. You called it unanswered prayer, I called it deep preparation. I didn't keep it from you. I kept you for it. Because what's sacred can't be rushed. What's eternal doesn't come through shortcuts. And I love you far too much to let temporary relief steal the growth your soul needs to carry the future I've written for you. I saw how you compared your life to others, how their milestones made your waiting feel like punishment. I watched the way you tried to make peace with the pace, only to grow restless again when another door didn't open. You didn't know the fire I kept you from, the traps I dismantled, the detours I blocked, not with force but with silence. You saw my stillness and interpreted it as indifference. But stillness was the strategy. I was working behind veils you weren't meant to lift just yet. I wasn't late. I was loving you wisely. Mercy often wears the disguise of delay, and grace sometimes sounds like not yet. I didn't tell you every reason because I wanted you to learn how to trust me without explanation, how to walk even when the path isn't fully lit, how to believe even when you're still empty-handed. The delay wasn't rejection, it was the soil where deeper faith could take root. You don't build endurance in moments of instant gratification. You build it in the stretch, in the quiet ache of prayers still unanswered, in the aching hope that hasn't yet been fulfilled but still shows up anyway. And though I know it hurt, I know the tears, the confusion, the hours spent wondering if you were just being forgotten. I need you to know that every second was intentional. Every pause held a purpose. Every silence was me working in the unseen, weaving things together so that when the time came, it would not just be right, it would be divine. You asked me for the destination, but I love you enough to focus on your foundation. I was not interested in just giving you something impressive. I was focused on making you someone unshakable. And what's more, I was near the whole time. Not passive, not indifferent. Present in your waiting. Holding your hand through the nights you didn't understand. Sitting with you when you stared at doors that wouldn't open. Praying for things that didn't move. Hoping for relief that seemed endlessly postponed. And even now, when you look back at the seasons that once felt barren, I will show you the fruit that quietly grew beneath the surface. You may not thank me today, but one day, when the promise arrives and your heart is strong enough to hold it, you'll see that what felt like me withholding was actually me wrapping my arms around you and whispering, "I'm not keeping this from you, I'm keeping you ready for it." You wept at midnight, whispering words you thought evaporated into emptiness. You pleaded, begged, bargained, thinking your voice barely reached beyond the ceiling. And when the days passed with no sign, when the weeks dragged and nothing shifted, you assumed I had dismissed you, that your need didn't carry enough weight to move me. But what you couldn't see, what I never stopped doing, was moving every piece behind the scenes, orchestrating outcomes your logic couldn't anticipate. You called it silence, but I called it strategy. You saw delay. I saw divine precision. You were watching for a door to swing open. I was building the foundation beneath your feet so that when it did, you'd be ready to stand and not fall through. What you called an action was me working in dimensions beyond your reach, in realms your eyes weren't created to see. I wasn't ignoring your cries, I was aligning hearts, shifting atmospheres, reworking timelines so the blessing wouldn't be just timely, but transforming. You thought your prayers vanished into space, but I collected everyone. None of your tears hit the ground unnoticed. None of your requests were lost in translation. While you were trying to understand why nothing changed, I was changing everything necessary for the miracle to arrive fully formed. If I gave it when you wanted, it would have collapsed under the weight of unhealed places within you. I wasn't denying you. I was building you. Because miracles don't just happen around you, they must happen within you too. You had to be strengthened to hold what you asked for. You had to be stretched to sustain what you were longing to receive. You asked me to fix the moment, but I was forming the future. You wanted it now. I wanted it lasting. And in the tension between your timeline and my truth, I never stepped away. I kept refining, not just circumstances, but your heart, your vision, your ability to recognize the blessing when it finally appeared. You begged me to come through. I never left. I was in the shadows, not absent, but anchoring every detail with wisdom. I didn't answer when you expected because I was protecting the magnitude of what you had no idea you were really praying for. Your words came from desperation, but my response came from covenant. And covenants don't ride. They root. I was gathering resources before you even knew you'd need them. I was sending people toward you who hadn't even met you yet. I was crafting encounters, divine alignments, holy intersections that required perfect timing to manifest fully. You were watching a clock. I was watching eternity. And now, you're closer than you realize to seeing what I've been forming in the hidden place. You may have doubted my presence, but I never doubted your worth. Even when you stopped believing the miracle would come, I didn't stop working on it. Even when you settled for less in your mind, I didn't downsize the blessing in mine. Because I never respond based on your faith level, I respond from the depths of my love. And my love said yes before you even asked. So don't mistake silence for absence. Don't assume the stillness means I'm unmoved. I have been preparing something far greater than what you were expecting, something not rushed, not random, not fragile, but something holy, enduring, and tailored exactly for you. And it's coming. You cried when it didn't open. You questioned me when your knock went unanswered. You stood before that opportunity, holding onto hope with trembling hands, convinced it was the only path forward, the only way your life could begin to make sense again. And when the silence grew loud, when the door stayed closed despite your faith, you felt like you were being punished. Like I was withholding something out of disappointment in you. But child, hear me. It was never rejection, it was redirection. The door you wanted so badly wasn't built to carry what I've placed inside of you. It wasn't sturdy enough for the calling that rests on your life. You were asking me to open something that would have led to limitation, to cycles I already delivered you from, to paths that end in regret instead of restoration. I let it stay shut not because I didn't hear you, but because I love you too much to answer prayers that pull you away from who I created you to be. You thought you were ready, but I saw what you couldn't see. I saw the broken framework on the other side. I saw the compromise it would cost you. I saw how it would slowly drain you and call it progress. I saw how it would feed your fear instead of your future. So I placed my hand on it and did not move. I heard every plea. I felt the ache in your chest as the days passed with no shift. And I did not remain still out of indifference. I remained still because I was rerouting you into something higher. You asked me to prove my love by opening the way, but I proved it by guarding what was beyond it. You wanted access. I gave you protection. And sometimes, the kindest thing I can do is say no when your heart is screaming yes. Sometimes the holiest move I make is to pause your progress so I can align your direction with your destiny. You've seen delay, but what I've been orchestrating is divine rerouting, pathways you never considered, doors you didn't even know existed, assignments you would have overlooked if that one yes had been granted. And even though you felt stuck, you weren't stranded, you were being repositioned. I was navigating you around the traps that come dressed as blessings. I was shifting you away from what you were settling for, steering you toward what would nourish your soul rather than simply satisfy your flesh. A detour wasn't punishment, it was preservation. Because when you arrive where I've designed for you to be, you'll realize the closed door was a divine act of mercy. You'll see that what you thought was loss was actually love in disguise. You'll look back and thank me for the times I didn't do what you asked. And even now, I'm still guiding you. You haven't missed your moment. You haven't lost your place. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're simply being redirected to the road that leads to more than you imagined. And though it's been painful, though it's required trust beyond your understanding, I promise where I'm taking you will be worth every no, every pause, every door that refused to open. Because I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to lead you home. You asked for things with all your heart, believing they were good, convinced they were necessary for your joy. You poured your trust into outcomes that looked beautiful on the outside but carried seeds of ruin inside. And when I didn't give them, when I stood silent instead of responding how you hoped, you felt overlooked, maybe even unloved. But the truth is, withholding them was my greatest act of protection. Because love doesn't always say yes. Love sometimes blocks the very thing that glitters, not because it lacks value, but because it hides venom. You were focused on how it looked. I was focused on what it would do to you. You saw potential. I saw the slow erosion of your soul. And while you were preparing to celebrate, I was stepping between you and a decision that would have left you empty, broken, and confused about who you really are. I did say no because I wanted to see you suffer. I said no because I wanted to preserve what I planted inside of you before the world had a name for your worth. I watched you grieve things I never meant for you to carry. I saw the ache in your eyes when the outcome shifted, when the blessing you thought you needed slipped through your fingers like dust. And I didn't rebuke your sorrow. I sat with you in it. I held your spirit close even when your mind called me unfair, because I knew what you did. I knew what would contaminate the purity I've been cultivating in you. I saw what that relationship would do to your calling. I saw how that opportunity would slowly reshape your priorities until you no longer recognized your own voice. I saw the future that would unfold if I gave you what you asked, and I chose your freedom over your comfort. I chose your healing over your preference, because you are not ordinary. And I refuse to give you what would shrink you into something lesser than the glory you were designed to carry. You prayed with sincerity, and I honored that, but I also looked deeper. I looked at what your spirit needed more than your emotions wanted. And sometimes that means I pull you back from the edge of something that looks like favor but functions like a trap. You couldn't see the slow compromise that would have crept in, the shift in your identity, the fracture in your peace, the erosion of your connection with me. You would have adjusted yourself to fit into something I never designed you to belong to. You would have called it growth, but I would have known it was survival. So I intervened, not loudly but clearly. And though it hurt, though it confused you, though it made you question my nearness, I never stopped loving you. In fact, that's when I love you the most. When I held the line. When I didn't bend to your desperation, because I saw the chains hidden beneath the promise. I don't bless based on urgency. I bless based on what will bring life to your soul. And now, even though you carry questions, even though part of you still wonders what could have been, I want you to understand that I never withheld anything that was meant to grow you. I only removed what would slowly undo what heaven has written about you. You were not denied, you were preserved. You were not dismissed, you were safeguarded. And as you walk forward, I will continue to give you not just what you want, but what will keep your spirit whole, your mind clear, and your heart anchored in me. You chased every door that seemed open, every voice that promised relief, every quick answer that felt easier than waiting for mine. You reached for people, for patterns, for distractions wrapped in temporary comfort, and each time they let you down, I was right there, never rubbing it in, never saying I told you so, only waiting with open arms. Again, you ran to what was familiar, even when it hurt you, because you thought familiarity was safer than faith. You listened to voices that fed your ego while starving your spirit, and I didn't leave. I watched as you gave your energy to things that drained you, as you poured out your heart for approval from people who never had the capacity to value it. I stood behind every scene, not sulking in silence, but staying available in case you turned back. I wasn't keeping score. I wasn't folding my arms in offense. I knew your search wasn't rebellion, it was desperation. You weren't trying to leave me, you just couldn't see me through the noise. I understood why you grasped for control when your world felt unsteady. I saw the fear that made you cling to substitutes, and still, I didn't withdraw. I waited not on the other side of your mess, but in the center of it, ready to meet you the moment you noticed I had never moved. You thought your mistakes created distance, but it was shame whispering lies to make you think I'd abandoned you. You thought my silence meant I was done, but my silence was sometimes the space you needed to come to the end of every other option and find that I was still here. I didn't compete for your attention like the others. I didn't demand that you choose me to prove your love. I remained steady, not because I needed you to earn back my presence, but because I refused to be another temporary voice that only stays when things are going well. You gave your heart to things that couldn't hold it, and I was grieved not because I was jealous, but because I saw the emptiness waiting for you on the other side. You didn't break my love when you wandered, you broke your own heart trying to fill it with what it was never made to contain. And even when you felt far, Even when you believed you'd gone too deep into choices that contradicted who you really are, I remained. Not watching to punish, but watching to redeem. You don't have to crawl back. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to fix yourself first. I already knew you'd try to find meaning in everything else before you realized I was the only answer that wouldn't shift. And yet, I stayed close enough to reach the second you turned your gaze in my direction again. I didn't demand perfection. I didn't require promises. I just waited for you to stop running to things that never knew your soul and remember the one who created it. All those other paths led you here not by accident, but by grace. Because sometimes you have to exhaust every false solution before your spirit is finally quiet enough to receive what's real. And what's real is this: you're still mine. After everything. After every detour. After every moment you thought I'd given up. I am still here. I am still calling. And I'm not holding your past against you, I'm holding the future wide open in front of you. Come to me not because you're perfect now, but because I never stopped wanting you even when you didn't want me. You didn't notice when the light inside you started dimming, but I did. I saw the way you kept showing up while feeling more and more disconnected, trying to hold on when you didn't even know what you were holding anymore. Your prayers became whispers, then sighs, and eventually silence. The flame you once carried flickered beneath the weight of disappointment, confusion, and exhaustion. You questioned if you were losing me, but really, you were just tired. You were carrying burdens too heavy, fighting battles too long, waiting on answers that seemed to drift further the more you reached for them. And still, even as your confidence in me wavered, even as your steps slowed, and your hope thinned, I never altered my purpose for your life. I didn't shrink back. I didn't rewrite your destiny based on your fatigue. I didn't trade your name for someone more energetic or enthusiastic. I stayed. I remained committed when you couldn't feel permitted. I held your place when you wandered. I kept building around you, preparing for the day you would look up and remember that nothing about your struggle ever scared me. Your weary heart didn't cancel your worth. Your fading faith didn't invalidate your calling. You assumed that because you stopped believing, I stopped moving. But I don't depend on the strength of your emotions, I operate from the constancy of my promise. When you were buried in discouragement, I was still writing victory over your name. When you wanted to quit, I was surrounding you with invisible grace that shielded your soul from total collapse. Even when you pulled away, I leaned in. I didn't love you for your consistency, I love you because you are mine. And though your heart grew heavy, my hands never let go. I wasn't looking for flawless belief, I was protecting the ember beneath the ashes, the tiny flicker of trust you didn't even know was still alive inside you. That's what I built my plan on, not your perfection, but your identity. You were chosen before the battle ever began. You were appointed before you ever knew how to endure. And while you questioned whether you were strong enough to finish, I had already written complete over your story. I never paused my purpose because you doubted. I simply waited for you to see that even your weakest days are covered in unshakable grace. I understand that life wore you out. I know that pain clouded your vision. I'm not disappointed in your weariness, I'm drawing near to it. I'm not demanding that you rise instantly, I'm kneeling beside you, reminding you that rest is not failure. Restoration takes time, and in that time, I'm still working. Quietly, faithfully, patiently. My plan doesn't crumble when your faith does. My plan isn't built on your best days, it's grounded in my eternal love. You might have lost your rhythm, but you haven't lost your place. You may feel disqualified, but I never removed your name from what I prepared for you. The promise still stands. The favor is still written. The doors I've ordained still wait for your return. So breathe, my child. Breathe and know that even when your belief bends under pressure, my hand holds everything steady. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken to continue. My plan never shifted, because my heart never changed. I am still with you. I am still for you. I am still leading you into everything I declared before your first breath, and nothing, not even your weariness, can stop what I've authored for you. You thought you were walking through the suffering alone, but every time your heart shattered, mine did too. Not in weakness, not because I lacked control, but because real love absorbs the weight of what the beloved is carrying. You couldn't see me in your darkest moments, but I was there, experiencing every sting, every loss, every disappointment, not as an observer, but as the one who chose to dwell in your sorrow until healing could rise from it. The tears that ran down your face didn't go unnoticed. They ran through my heart like rivers, carving compassion into the depths of eternity. I didn't just watch you break, I felt every silent ache you were too tired to explain. I felt the tension behind your eyes when you smiled just to survive the day. I felt the hollowness that crept in during long nights, when you couldn't remember what peace felt like. I felt it all. Not distantly, not metaphorically. I carried it within me. Because I made you. I know the language of your soul. I know the quiet cries behind your brave exterior. And while you assumed I was far away in glory, I was kneeling beside you in the mess, breathing alongside you as you tried to make it through another moment without falling apart. I took no pleasure in your pain. I'm not the one who authored it. But I stayed in it with you, suffering alongside you so you'd never have to question whether you were truly seen. You believe no one understood, and it was true, no human fully could. But I did. I do. And I always will. I felt the full force of your anguish, not just glimpses, but the deep groans of your spirit that words couldn't contain. And yet I never looked away. I never flinched. I didn't recoil when the pain got too loud or too ugly. I didn't pull back when your emotions grew wild with grief. I stepped closer. I felt the pressure building inside you and held you when you didn't even know you were being held. When you were on the verge of giving up. When you whispered that maybe the suffering was too much to bear, I gathered the fragments of your strength and stood guard over the little hope that remained. I wasn't waiting for you to recover so I could return. I was already present, carrying the weight with you, often carrying you too. The pain didn't mean I left. The pain was the place where I chose to prove just how near I truly am. My love didn't flinch at your agony, it multiplied its presence. And not only did I feel it, I bore it. And the cross, I absorbed the very sorrow you thought no one could carry. The betrayal, the isolation, the fear, the emptiness, I know it. Not in theory, but in experience. So when you say no one gets it, remember this. I do. When you say no one sees how deep it hurts, remember this. I already saw it, and I'm still here. You are not a burden. Your anguish doesn't repel me. It moves me. It draws me to you with intensity beyond anything you've imagined. That's why I haven't left. That's why I keep whispering to your tired soul. I know how heavy it's been. I know how long it's lasted. And I'm not asking you to push through alone. I'm not demanding strength from a heart that's already trembling. I'm offering to carry you the rest of the way. Because I feel it too. I always have. And that pain, though it tried to crush you, will become the very evidence of how deeply, wildly, unconditionally you are loved. That moment, the one where your knees gave out and you slid to the floor as if the weight on your chest had finally crushed every last defense you had left, that moment didn't pass unnoticed. You didn't have the strength to reach for me, but I was already there before you fell. Not just present in the room, but wrapped around your spirit like an invisible covering, protecting you from the heaviness that tried to bury you. You didn't know it, but you were surrounded. While your body trembled and your thoughts spiraled into places darker than you'd ever confessed, I stood beside you in stillness so sacred that angels didn't dare interrupt. Your collapse was not a failure, it was a signal. A cry your lips didn't speak, but your soul released. And I heard it. You didn't realize how close death brushed against your hope that night. But I fought for you not with noise or display, but with presence. When your heart couldn't form a single word, I translated every heartbeat into language heaven understood. You thought you were forgotten on that cold floor, but you were being held. I watched the tears that burned your face, I saw the way your chest tightened like it couldn't hold another breath. And I whispered peace not as an idea, but as a force that began to stir even in your collapse. I didn't demand you get up. I didn't rush your sorrow. I waited. I stayed. Not 1 second did I retreat. Not 1 breath did I withhold. You expected silence, but I gave you sacred stillness. You feared judgment, but I offered mercy so thick it wrapped around your brokenness like a healing balm. You wondered if I even noticed, and I need you to know, I noticed everything. I stayed until your soul remembered it was allowed to breathe again. I stayed until your heart, though bruised, started beating with the faint pulse of survival. I stayed until your lungs, tight with panic, slowly received air again. You didn't rise on your own. I was lifting you from the inside, restoring what despair tried to silence. You assumed strength had abandoned you, but strength was never gone. It was just hidden under layers of grief that had to be unraveled gently. I did that, with hands not of force but of tenderness. You thought your collapse disqualified you, but it was in that very collapse that the deepest healing began. It was never about you proving anything. It was always about you allowing me to be enough when you had nothing left. The moment in your room wasn't the end, it was a turning point. The holy place where I met you in your most human hour, and stayed, not because you earned it, but because I love you far too much to leave. And even now, when memories of that night creep in, trying to convince you it was your lowest point, I want you to look again not at the pain, but at the presence that carried you through it. Look again at how you survived. Look again at the strength that began to grow in the silent. That was me. I was there. I stayed. I breathed when you couldn't. And I'll keep doing it. Every time you sink. Every time the world becomes too heavy. Every time life pushes harder than you can withstand. I'll be there. I'll stay again. Until you breathe again. You were trembling, broken under pressure, and what came out of your mouth wasn't polished or reverent. It was raw, frustrated, and sharp-laced with anger you didn't know you still carried. And when you lifted your voice not in worship but in complaint, when you let the fury spill out like a storm too long contained, you were sure you crossed a line. You expected thunder in return. You expected me to turn my face away, to respond with silence laced in disapproval. But I didn't flinch. I didn't withdraw. I didn't bring wrath. I brought covering. I brought compassion. I brought the same grace that was extended from a bloodstained cross when the crowd mocked me, and I still said, "Forgive them." You weren't rebelling, you were unraveling. And I knew it. I didn't misinterpret your scream for defiance when it was really desperation erupting from a heart too heavy to carry its ache any longer. You shouted into the sky hoping something, anything would answer, and while you braced for consequence, I embraced your humanity. I knew you weren't trying to dishonor me, you were trying to survive. Your words were jagged, but I heard the heartbreak beneath them. You weren't cursing me out of hatred. You were reacting to the weight of pain that had gone unanswered for what felt like too long. And so, instead of sending judgment, I sent mercy, quiet, deep mercy that wrapped around your wounded spirit and stayed close even while you pushed everything else away. You looked up expecting me to leave, but I leaned in closer. I didn't need you to explain yourself. I didn't need you to clean it up. I already knew the backstory behind your outburst. I saw the build-up, the unanswered prayers, the mounting pressure, the betrayal you never got closure from, the cycles you thought would never break. I didn't label you ungrateful. I called you weary. I didn't see rebellion. I saw a heart longing for rescue. And even when your tone was sharp, mine was still soft. I didn't react out of ego. I responded out of everlasting love. You see, I don't get offended the way people do. I don't abandon you because you had a moment. I don't revoke promises because you cracked under pressure. I remain. I cover. I understand. And instead of meeting your accusations with fury, I met them with gentleness. Because what you needed in that moment wasn't correction, it was comfort. What you needed wasn't to be silenced, it was to be seen. And I did. I saw you. Fully. And still, I chose mercy. I always will. When others shame you for your lowest hour, I stand beside you, reminding you that my love doesn't fracture when your composure does. I'm not the kind of savior who demands perfection before giving peace. I'm the kind who wraps a trembling heart in reassurance and whispers, I still want you. I still want you after every outburst, after every unfiltered question, after every tear-soaked night where you stared into the void and wondered if I even cared. I didn't retreat. I didn't record your words to throw them back at you later. I covered them. I forgave them. I understood them. Because I'm not intimidated by your emotions I created, though. I know how they work. I know what they signal. And I've never once been surprised by your weakness. I account for it in everything I do. That's why the cross was never about behavior, it was always about redemption. Not just when you're composed and prayerful, but when you're undone, and angry, and messy, and fragile. That's where I meet you. It's where I wrap you up in love that doesn't keep score. And I need you to know, even when you cursed the heavens, I stayed. Even when you turned away, I was still facing you. And nothing, not even your loudest shout, could stop me from loving you completely. I waited, not because I had nothing else to do, but because you were worth every second of stillness. You mistook my silence for passivity, but it was the steady heartbeat of love that refuses to walk away. You assumed I wasn't moving because I didn't care, but the truth is, I was holding back judgment and offering you time, space, breath, and room to return without fear of being punished for the journey that delayed you. My patience wasn't hesitation, it was intercession. I stood between what should have reached you and what I still believed was possible for you. I bore the tension of time for your sake. Every day you drifted, I extended mercy again. Not one sunrise passed without me whispering your name across eternity, hoping you'd hear me even through the noise of your choices. You were never an inconvenience to me. I never rolled my eyes at your delay. I never grew tired of waiting. I was not pacing heaven impatiently, I was watching with expectation, with hope deeper than oceans, that today might be the day you'd remember who you are and who I still am. Others gave up on you quickly. They expected instant change or clean answers. But I understood that healing takes time. Returning takes courage. And I knew your detour wasn't your final destination. So I waited, not with distance but with longing. I stayed ready, not holding shame, but holding the door wide open. While the world demanded performance, I prepared a place for your return that didn't require perfection. While they asked where you went, I stood looking for you with compassion in my eyes and joy rising in my heart at the thought that you'd eventually run back into my arms. You didn't see me, but I was watching every step. Even when you walked in the opposite direction, I tracked your path, not to chase with guilt, but to meet you the moment your strength gave out. You didn't know how much I wanted to hold you again, to remind you that the love you once tasted had never left the table. I kept it warm. I kept it ready. You thought time disqualified you, but time was me showing you that I don't measure love by calendars or conditions. You assumed you had to start over, but I never erased your place. My patience was never a pause in my love, it was proof of it. I waited when you didn't think you were worth waiting for. I waited when you chose other things. I waited while you tried to fill the ache with anything but me. And I didn't wait with crossed arms, I waited with open ones. I waited while writing destruction into redemption. I waited while shaping testimonies from the ruins you didn't know I could still use. You thought you had to find your way back on your own, but I was walking toward you the whole time. I didn't leave you in the wilderness. I stood at the edge, calling softly, walking slowly toward every part of you that still wondered if I cared. And now, as your heart beats again in my direction, I want you to know, not one moment of waiting was wasted. Not one tear you cried during your wandering was ignored. I collected each one and kept them like treasures, because they came from the soul I never gave up on. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too far. You are exactly where you need to be for me to embrace you again. And I will without hesitation. Because my patience wasn't a sign of indifference. It was a daily choice to believe in your return, to hope for your restoration, to love you long enough for you to realize you never stopped being mine. You reached a point where it all felt too hard, where faith seemed like fiction and hope like a distant memory. You stopped praying, not out of rebellion, but because you didn't see the point anymore. You let go, slowly at first, then all at once. You drifted, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. And when you did, you thought I'd do the same. You expected me to walk away like others had when your light dimmed, like those who only stayed when you had something to offer. But that's not how I love. I don't require consistency to remain constant. I don't need performance to stay present. So even when you stopped reaching, I kept holding. When you turned your face, I kept looking at you. When your heart grew cold, mine burned all the more fiercely with a fire that doesn't fade based on your feelings. I didn't need your faith to validate my promise. I already made up my mind about you. You quitting didn't cancel what I started. You giving up didn't change what I authored. Because what I began in you was never dependent on your strength to finish. I knew there would be moments like this. I knew there would be days when you would sit in silence, not because you were at peace, but because you were empty. I knew your spirit would feel worn thin. I knew weariness would whisper lies into your mind. And that's why I held the line. That's why I covered you when you didn't ask. That's why I sent reminders, small ones, subtle ones, just enough to keep your heart from going completely numb. I didn't leave when your grip slipped. I reinforced everything that mattered behind the veil. While you gave up on what we had, I guarded the flame. You didn't know how close I stayed when you stopped expecting anything good. You didn't feel me when you cried without words, but I was sitting in the same room, cradling what remained of your belief. I knew the collapse wouldn't be forever. I knew your soul would stir again. I knew the questions weren't the end of your story. You thought your surrender to hopelessness pushed me away, but I leaned in closer. I don't require you to be unbroken to be loved. I'm not fragile around your doubts. I'm not offended by your exhaustion. In fact, I understand it more than you realize. I know what it means to feel forsaken. I know what it means to carry pain without answers. And that's why I stayed when you stopped looking. That's why I kept whispering in the stillness, kept placing people, words, moments, right in your path, tiny lifelines you didn't always recognize, but that were drenched in my mercy. I wasn't waiting for you to prove something. I was waiting for you to remember who I am. Not the version shaped by disappointment. Not the image formed by your wounds. But the real me, the one who refuses to give up. The one who sees the gold even when you only see ashes. The one who loves you with a fierceness that storms cannot quench. You didn't lose me. You just forgot I don't walk away. You let go, yes, but I held tighter. And now, even as you begin to wonder if you can come back, if there's still something left in you that's worthy of grace, I want you to hear this clearly. I never left. I never stopped. I never once entertained the thought of abandoning you. What I started, I will finish. What you dropped, I'm still carrying. And when you're ready, I'll be standing right where I've always been, arms open, heart steady, full of joy that you're still mine, even after everything. You went searching for silence that wasn't sacred, for calm that never settled, for solutions that promised relief but delivered restlessness. You tried distractions dressed as healing. You wrapped yourself in comfort that only numbed for a moment, and when the effects wore off, the ache grew louder. You called it peace, but it was escape, an empty room disguised as refuge. You thought if you could just stay busy, if you could keep moving, keep building, keep pretending to be fine, the storm inside would eventually wear itself out. But storms don't stop because you ignore them. They quiet only when surrendered to the one who commands the winds. And while you filled your life with noise to avoid the void, I remained still, not absent, but present in the place you kept bypassing. I didn't chase you down with fury. I didn't demand your attention. I simply waited right at the center of the rest you were unknowingly craving. I knew every substitute you turned to would eventually exhaust you. I knew every imitation of peace would leave you emptier than before. I saw the weariness under your smile, the tired soul hidden behind polished distractions. You tried to find answers in things that looked good on the outside but couldn't touch your inner turmoil. And when they failed you, when the high faded, when the applause stopped, when the escape turned into a cage, I didn't say I told you so. I said, I'm still here. I wasn't angry that you searched elsewhere. I was heartbroken that you believed I wouldn't be enough. Because I created the kind of rest that doesn't expire. I offer the kind of peace that doesn't need to be chased. It finds you when you stop running. You kept hoping the next thing would finally make you feel safe, seen, stable. But peace doesn't live in circumstances. It lives in me. It's not found in the absence of pain, but in the presence of my love. And while you poured your energy into finding it everywhere else, I prepared a place within me that was never shaken, never altered, never out of reach. I watched you strive, hustle, and perform. I watched you shrink your heart just to keep others comfortable. I watched you say yes to things that drained you because you were afraid of losing what little control you thought you had. And through all of it, I waited not just for your return, but for your surrender. Because what I offer doesn't require you to prove anything. You don't have to earn my rest. You just have to collapse into it. You just have to admit you're tired. You just have to bring the unrest to me and trust that I won't turn you away, even if you spent years in other arms. I know how loud the world has been. I know how enticing the temporary fixes have looked. But none of them can hold you like I do. None of them can reach the ache beneath the ache. You were designed to rest in me, not run in circles trying to create peace through performance. And I'm not here to condemn you for the chase. I'm here to call you back. Back to stillness that heals instead of hides. Back to love that doesn't expire. Back to wholeness that doesn't shift with seasons. When you're ready, come sit with me. Not with shame. Not with fear. Just honesty. Let the mask go. Let the striving stop. You don't need another temporary fix. You need rest that breathes with you. I am that rest. I always will be. You wandered, unsure of where you were heading, uncertain of how you got so far from the place your soul used to feel alive. You didn't mean to stray. It happened gradually, one small compromise, one distracted season, one detour that felt temporary until it wasn't. Before long, you looked around and couldn't recognize the path beneath your feet. It felt like failure. It felt like you had ruined the story. And when you looked back at the trail you left behind, all you could see were missteps, regrets, and moments you wished you could erase. But I didn't see it that way. I never once saw you as lost. I saw you as beloved in the middle of becoming. I saw every step, every stumble, every silent cry for help that never left your lips. And instead of shame, I poured grace. Instead of removing my hand, I drew nearer. You believed you were off course, but you were still in my care. What looked to you like wandering was, to me, a road I had already walked ahead of you. You saw confusion, but I saw a path lined with mercy. You saw delay, I saw development. You saw wasted years, I saw chapters rich with redemption still to be revealed. There is no road too crooked for me to guide you through. There is no place too far for my presence to reach. Every time you thought you were walking in the dark, I was leaving light hidden along the way, small reminders, moments of clarity, people who spoke truth you did expect, situations that shifted even when you had no strength left to pray. That wasn't coincidence. That was grace in motion. That was me, preparing the next step before you even realized you'd taken a wrong turn. You thought you had to find your way back alone. But I never asked you to retrace the past. I asked you to trust that I'm making beauty out of it. The pressure to figure it all out was never yours to carry. You were not created to navigate every storm without direction. You were created to follow the one who walks with purpose even through uncertainty. And I haven't lost track of you. Not for a moment. I've been mapping this journey with wisdom beyond your comprehension, ensuring that even the detours would serve you, not destroy you. What the enemy meant for confusion, I'm using for clarity. What you thought was delay, I'm turning into divine timing. What felt like being lost, I'm transforming into a new level of intimacy with me that you never would have reached on a straight path. I specialize in restoration, not just of time, but of trust. Trust in me, and trust in yourself again. Your ability to choose rightly doesn't determine your worth. Your inability to predict what's next doesn't make you less. And the moments you want to forget, I'm weaving them into testimony. I'm not waiting for you to apologize for every wrong turn. I'm inviting you to realize I've been with you all along. I haven't lost my patience. I haven't changed my plan. I'm not rewriting your purpose because of your past. I'm fulfilling it in ways you didn't see coming. So lift your head. The way may look unfamiliar, but the one walking with you knows exactly where it's going. I marked this path with grace long before you knew you'd need it. You haven't lost your way. You're just being led differently. And I'm still guiding you with every step, through every silence, into everything I've promised. I heard every word you whispered in the dark, each one soaked in longing, wrapped in hope, released with trembling faith. I caught every syllable that left your lips before you even knew how to put it into language. Even the groans, even the sighs, even the moments when all you could offer was silence heavy with meaning. I received it all. But while you thought nothing was happening, I was doing something greater than you asked. I wasn't dismissing your cries. I was shaping them into something deeper, something far more lasting than a momentary fix. You were asking for relief, and I was preparing a revelation. You were pleading for something immediate, but I was crafting something that will outlast the moment and echo through eternity. You measured the value of your prayers by how quickly they were answered, but I measured them by how fully they connected your heart to mine. Because I don't just respond to words, I respond to the place they come from. And what you offered me wasn't just sound, it was surrender. It was trust. It was your spirit reaching out when everything around you told you not to. That kind of prayer doesn't disappear. That kind of prayer shakes heaven. You thought your voice had been lost in the crowd of the world's noise, but I tuned in before the words ever left your heart. I didn't just listen, I leaned in. I dwelled there. I carried your prayers into places you haven't seen, into lives you didn't know you touched, into battles you didn't realize you were winning just by standing in faith. You were looking for something immediate, but I was investing your prayers into a future that can't be stolen. Because I'm not a vending machine, I'm the author of time. And when I answer, it's not to oppress you, it's to transform you. I delayed not because I was unsure, but because what I was doing in lays. I was aligning people, preparing doors, removing barriers in realms you don't even walk in yet. And the timing, it wasn't silence, it was sanctification. It was the holy hush before a breakthrough that would rewrite not just a situation, but your soul. Every prayer you thought bounced off the ceiling was actually being planted. And the fruit will come not always in the way you pictured, but in the way your destiny requires. I don't waste intercession. I don't forget petitions. I don't misplace trust. I treasure it. I multiply it. I breathe on it until it becomes something bigger than you ever imagined. That's why I haven't answered everything the way you wanted, because I'm turning those cries into rivers of impact. You'll see it in your family, in your future, in the healing of wounds that you thought were too deep to mend. You'll see it when others receive miracles that were birthed in your unseen midnight prayers. You'll see it in the days to come, when moments align so perfectly you'll remember. I prayed for this. I didn't even know what I was asking, but he did. I'm not ignoring you. I'm immortalizing what you offered, turning simple words into heavenly movements, letting your trust shape things far beyond your reach. And when it all unfolds, when the answers pour out in waves rather than drops, you'll know it was never about the delay. It was about the depth. You weren't forgotten. You were being written into something eternal. You thought the absence of words meant distance. You believed that when you stopped praying, when you couldn't bring yourself to speak, when all you did was sit in quiet confusion or fatigue, that I had stopped paying attention. But your silence was never wasted breath to me. It carried the full weight of everything you didn't know how to say. It held the questions that had no form, the sorrow too deep for language, the tiredness that didn't have energy for explanation. You may have stopped talking, but I never stopped listening. Because I don't need sound to understand you, I know the language of your soul. I heard every heartbeat filled with longing. I felt every moment when you stared into the dark, wondering if I still care. Your silence echoed with emotion, and I was tuned into it all, not demanding you pull yourself together, but remaining with you in that fragile stillness where real healing begins. You were afraid I would see your silence as rejection, but I saw it as a cry too deep for words. You didn't push me away, you simply didn't know how to reach for me anymore. That's not rebellion. That's exhaustion. And I never rebuke exhaustion. I cradle it. I shelter it. I meet it with compassion so profound it breaks through the walls you didn't even realize you'd built. You weren't ignoring me, you were trying to breathe. Trying to find a reason to believe again. And I stayed beside you, not because you remembered me, but because I never forgot you. I'm not a father who walks away when his child grows quiet. I draw closer. I listen harder. I wait with more tenderness than you think you deserve. Every time you sat in silence, I sat with you. When you felt disconnected, I was already entwined in the fibers of your thoughts. You didn't have to speak for me to understand the war going on inside. I knew the confusion. I recognized the ache. I stayed, not waiting for a performance, but simply being present with you in the most sacred way, unconditionally, attentively, gently. I wasn't disappointed in your silence. I was moved by it, because it meant you still remained near enough for me to hear what couldn't be spoken. You were still choosing to remain, even when you didn't know how. That's the kind of faith most people miss, the kind where you stay, quietly, wearily, without the strength to speak but not willing to completely walk away. That quiet presence of yours, it mattered more than you know. It was a whisper of surrender that I treasured, a signal that you hadn't stopped hoping entirely, even if it felt buried beneath the weight of grief or confusion. And now I want you to know, I never needed eloquent words from you. I only wanted your heart, even bruised, even silent, even questioning, because I can work with that. I can restore that. I can rebuild from the ashes of what you once knew and breathe life into what you thought was dead. Your silence wasn't empty. It was full of things you didn't know how to voice, but I understood anyway. That's what makes me different. I don't require you to find the perfect words, I already know what they mean before they're spoken. So even now, if you still don't know what to say, don't force it. Just sit with me. Let your stillness speak. Let your heartbeat pray. Let your sighs rise like incense. I'm still listening. I always was. And I always will be. You didn't know what would happen when you finally lifted your eyes again, when the weight of it all became too much, when the silence could no longer hold your aching heart, when the pull inside you whispered, "Try again." You were scared. Scared I'd be gone. Scared I'd be distant. Scared that after all the wondering, all the doubting, all the silence, I'd grown tired of waiting. But child, I never took my eyes off of you. And the moment your heart stirred, the instant your gaze even slightly shifted back toward me, I ran. I didn't wait for a perfect return. I didn't stand still, waiting for you to prove something. I ran not with hesitation, but with joy. Not with judgment, but with open arms. I ran like a father who had been watching the road since the day you left, eyes fixed on the horizon, heart burning with hope that today would be the day you'd look up again. You didn't have to crawl. You didn't have to rehearse an apology. You didn't have to clean yourself up first. Just the tilt of your soul in my direction sent me sprinting through every barrier you thought existed between us. I didn't walk toward you slowly. I didn't test your sincerity before responding. I broke the distance with urgency, because I knew that even your smallest glance meant something deep inside you was still alive, still longing, still reaching for what was always yours, me. And in that moment, heaven moved. Not because of your eloquence, but because of your return. All of heaven rejoices not over perfection, but over one who dares to come home again. You thought you had to earn my nearness, but I had already decided to meet you with everything you needed before you even took your first step back. I wasn't keeping score. I wasn't collecting failures. I was preparing a celebration. I didn't need explanations. I just needed your heart back in my direction. And now that it is even just a little, even just a flicker, I want you to feel what's always been true. You're still mine. Fully. Undeniably. No part of your past cancels that. No silence. No anger. No time away disqualifies you. I saw the moment you turned, even inwardly. I saw the breath you took when you finally whispered, "Are you still there?" And that was enough. That was all I needed to come running. Because I was never waiting with cold detachment. I was watching with aching love. I was standing like a father whose arms have never stopped being wide open. You imagined I'd be disappointed. But what I felt was delight. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are. You are my beloved. The one I've been waiting to embrace without condition. The one I would cross time and space for. The one I already paid the price to restore. And now that your eyes are meeting mine again, I want you to know there's no shame here. There's no guilt in my embrace. Only grace, only mercy, only the warmth of a love that outruns everything you thought would keep me away. This is not a beginning from scratch. This is a continuation of what I never stopped building. I never paused the story. I just waited for you to rejoin it. And now that you have, I will walk with you step by step, not as a God who demands perfection, but as a Savior who already carried the cost of your return. You looked up. That was enough. And I ran not because I had to, but because I couldn't wait one more second without you in my arms again. You expected me to bring up everything. To remind you of the detours, the delays, the days you stayed silent when I called your name. You were bracing yourself for correction, for a list of where you went wrong and why you should have returned sooner. But I wasn't preparing a speech, I was preparing a place. I wasn't holding a mirror to your mistakes, I was holding out my arms. Because my love doesn't demand an explanation before it welcomes you back. You weren't met with judgment. You were met with joy. You were never going to hear a lecture, I never rehearsed one. All I wanted was you. All I ever wanted was to have you home, close, resting where you've always belonged, within the warmth of my embrace that doesn't change with your performance. I didn't ask where you'd been. I didn't scold you for how long it took. I just wrapped you in acceptance before you even had the words to apologize. That's how mercy works. It runs faster than guilt, and it speaks louder than condemnation. The moment you opened your heart again, I flooded the space with grace. Not a trace of shame remained. I'm not interested in shaming you into intimacy. I'm here to restore, not to remind you of every step you wish you could undo. What matters to me is not how far you've wandered, but that you're back in my presence again. That you let yourself be loved, even when you felt least deserving of it. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to prove you've changed. Just breathe here. Just let me hold you. I know what life has done to you. I know the wounds you carry aren't all from rebellion. Some were carved by disappointment, by heartbreak, by trying to survive in a world that doesn't always see your soul. I saw the nights you cried and felt like no one cared. I heard the words spoken over you that made you believe you were hard to love. I watched the weight grow heavier while you tried to smile like it didn't hurt. And now, as you rest in me again, let me be the one place you never have to hide anything. Let my arms be the shelter you were always searching for in everything else. You've spent so long expecting people to turn away when you reveal the real you. But I don't flinch at brokenness. I draw closer to it. The cracks don't disqualify you there where my light pours in. You don't need to perform here. You don't need to be strong. You don't need to have the right words. Just be still. Just be held. Let the healing happen in the quiet where shame can no longer speak. I've silenced every voice that told you you're too much or not enough. And in this space right here, right now, there is only one truth I want you to breathe in. You are mine. Still. Fully. Eternally. And I'm not holding anything against you. What I have for you now isn't punishment, it's restoration. What I'm giving you is a delay, it's a fresh beginning. And what's waiting ahead of you isn't consequence, it's purpose, reborn and reignited. There's no delay in my love, and no detour too complicated, no broken piece too shattered. You returned, and that's enough. You opened your heart again, and that's all I needed. No shame, no lecture, just me running to hold you, and never letting go. When the world around you started to fall apart, when everything you built seemed to crumble in your hands, you assumed it was over. You felt the loss deep, like a door slammed in your face after you'd given all you had. You mourned what you thought would last, what you thought would define your future. You saw endings everywhere, but I saw preparation. You saw collapse, but I saw clearing. You saw broken pieces, but I saw materials for rebuilding. What looked like destruction to you was the necessary dismantling of what couldn't carry you where I'm taking you next. I never destroyed you. I was removing what was blocking the next chapter from unfolding. You wept over closed doors, unaware that I was sealing them because they led nowhere. You called it loss, but I called it rescue. You thought I took everything from you, but I was making room for what could finally fit your true calling. Sometimes I have to strip away what you thought was security so you'll stop clinging to temporary things that keep you small. You were not being punished, you were being positioned. You didn't fail. You were freed. What ended was never the foundation of your life, it was just a season, and I'm the God who turns seasons into stepping stones. I know it felt final. I know it hurt to watch dreams collapse, relationships fade, and plans unravel. But endings in my hands are never empty. They are always pregnant with purpose. You couldn't see what I was orchestrating beneath the ashes, but I was weaving a new story from threads you thought were useless. I wasn't closing chapters to leave you in confusion. I was turning the page because the next part of your story couldn't begin until this one ended. It's not over. It's shifting. It's becoming. You prayed for breakthrough, but breakthrough often comes disguised as breaking. You asked for transformation, but transformation requires releasing what can't go with you. I never promise comfort, I promise completion. And sometimes completion requires collapse. But even in the collapse, I was holding you. Even when you felt stripped, I was protecting you from things you didn't know were draining your strength. I wasn't silent. I was working in the unseen, setting the stage for redemption so glorious that you'll look back one day and thank me for the things that didn't work out. Don't confuse the end of a plan with the end of my promise. You're still on schedule. You're still on holy ground. What felt like delay was divine preparation. What seemed like a grave is actually the soil of resurrection. You've been buried, yes, but not to die. To grow. To rise. To carry more glory than you've ever known before. I know it's hard to see now, but soon you'll understand why certain doors closed so suddenly, why certain people left, why certain dreams shifted. I was protecting the purity of your purpose. You were clinging to temporary forms of fulfillment, but I'm after your forever freedom. So breathe. The ending wasn't a rejection, it was a redirection. I'm not done with you. You haven't missed it. You're not too late. The plan didn't die. It transformed. What you thought was gone forever will return, not in the same shape, but stronger, refined, and full of my fingerprint. I specialize in turning endings into entrances. This is not your burial, it's your beginning. You clung to things because they felt familiar. You held on to people, plans, and comforts that gave you a sense of control, even when they quietly drained your strength. You believed certain things were essential to your survival, but I saw how they kept you from depending on what could never be shaken, me. So, one by one, I started removing what was temporary, not to hurt you, but to free you. I took nothing from you without preparing something deeper, something permanent. You thought I was stripping you bare, but I was uncovering your roots, because the weight of the future I've planned for you cannot rest on fragile foundations. You didn't understand it at first. You mistook the pruning for punishment. You called it loss when it was really liberation. I let certain relationships end, not because you were unworthy of love, but because they couldn't walk with you into the place of healing I was leading you. I allowed certain opportunities to fade, not because you failed, but because I was protecting you from success that would have destroyed your spirit. I loosened your grip on what you thought was your only source of peace, so that you would realize peace was never found in things, it's found in me. I wanted you to see that you are more resilient than you think, that you can stand even when what once supported you is gone, because my strength is the foundation beneath your every step. There were moments when you cried out, asking why I was letting it all fall apart. You didn't see that every subtraction was making space for something sacred. I wasn't taking from you, I was making room inside you. I was removing clutter so that clarity could find a home. I was emptying your hands so they could finally receive what was meant for them. I knew you wouldn't let go if I didn't help you loosen your grip, because your heart loves deeply, even when it hurts. That's why I didn't rip things away in anger. I allowed time, gentleness, and grace to do the work, so when you finally realized what I was doing, you wouldn't collapse, you'd understand. I know it's been painful. I know it has felt unfair. But you will soon see how I've turned every loss into a lesson, every emptiness into encounter. You'll see how the very things you thought you couldn't live without were never your source, they were just reflections of the source that has always been within you. You will see that what I give after the pruning will not only replace what was lost, but will redefine what you call abundance. You asked me to make you strong, I did it by teaching you what to stand on when everything else is gone. You asked me to bring you closer to me, I did it by removing what distracted you. Now look at you. You survived the shaking. You're still here, breathing, learning, trusting again. What you lost didn't destroy you, it revealed you. You are becoming who I always saw in you. And what's ahead is not smaller because of what's behind, it's greater, purer, steadier. Don't mourn what I removed. Thank me for what I'm restoring. I'm not done building. I'm not finished forming. What I'm preparing will not fade away, and this time, it won't have to be taken to teach you what stays. You'll recognize that every empty space was actually sacred ground being prepared for new glory to grow. You will eat again from the fruit of joy, drink from the well of peace, and live from the abundance that doesn't depend on anything fragile. The loss was never the end, it was the refining that prepared you for what's eternal. So lift your head, my child. What I remove, I will replace with something that cannot be shaken, cannot be stolen, cannot be lost again. This is my promise. This is my love. This is how I rebuild stronger, holier, eternal. Amen.